Today, I am so excited to share with you a special interview with Jodie Brown. Jodie is an Instagram coach and a branding coach for beauty business owners and hairstylists. She teaches you how to figure out what is unique about you that no other person or business in this world has, and how to translate that into an Instagram profile and Instagram content that attracts your dream clients and gets them to book with you. So if you've been feeling kind of meh about your Instagram these days, and you're also trying to figure out what makes you unique and how can you really connect with the right kind of people, listen up because this interview is so good. Let's jump into my chat with Jodie. Hey Jodie, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. How are you doing today?
I am doing so good. Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to speak with you. It's cool to connect with another Canadian because we're both Canadian girls. We're both in the beauty industry. We're lamenting now. We were just chatting before about how cold it is, so we've got that in common for sure. So, Jodie, I'm really pumped up to talk to you about branding and Instagram and breaking the whole thing down. But before we get into branding, which I know is your topic. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, what your background is, and how you got into teaching Instagram and branding.
Okay, so I feel like this was kind of like a serendipitous journey how I got into doing what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I teach branding and Instagram to beauty pros, and specifically how to show up consistently and as a brand without having to stress constantly about the algorithm and different content types. So I really focus in on the foundations that set you up for long-term success, because I think so often we hear about like all these hacks and tricks and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but we end up spinning our wheels because there's no foundation. So that is definitely my focus.
Yeah.
And then I also do copywriting and social media content creation for other educators and
Oh, that's so
coaches.
cool.
So
I didn't know that you did that.
yeah, it's something that I never have really talked about because I have, luckily, with lots of referrals, been pretty busy with it from the get-go. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just something I love and kind of not fell into, but you know how things just all work. So my journey into doing what I do today was I was a hairstylist for over 15 years. My mom was a salon owner. So I just always loved the side of the industry that was like running the business. And even as a commission stylist, like I was always thinking about different ways that we could market myself
Yeah.
and, do all those kind of things. So I did a year. I always had an interest in different sides of the industry. So I did a year in sales for a distributor before I went on my maternity leave. I quickly realized that it just wasn't quite it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there were elements I liked, but it wasn't quite there. So after I had my son, I decided to go back behind the chair, and I was off for about 18 months. And that was when the big balayage explosion happened, I guess. And
When was
also,
this?
it was like 2014.
Okay. Yeah, because I
So
only found out about balayage like probably after that, but you're like at the leading edge of the industry. So it's like you learn as a hairstylist about balayage before everybody else does.
yeah, and actually, no, my son was born in 2014, so it was probably more like 2016 when I went back behind the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm thinking about it, you know how the years all blur
Oh
together.
yeah, absolutely.
So I went back because I was planning on staying off longer. Someone asked me to come to their salon, someone I had worked with, so I did, but it was a brand new salon. And I had decided, like when I went back, that I was going to do things a lot differently. So I wasn't able to work weekends, I wasn't able to work evenings. And typically, that's how I had always been taught you had to build your clientele. So you just had to be available all the time. I had a new baby and a husband that worked out of town, so that wasn't an option. And so I decided that what I was going to do, because this was again in a new area, there was no walk-in traffic, and I had to make this make sense because I was now paying for childcare. So I decided that I was going to go all in on learning Instagram. It was free, and like we didn't have any money at the time. I was a new mom. My husband was an apprentice. Like there was no, paying for ads in the paper and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff because it's expensive, right? And it was expensive at the time. So I decided I was going to build up my clientele and my business using Instagram. So I took, as many courses as I could. I invested in my first online education. I watched a ton of YouTube videos. I listened to, whatever content was available, which was not a lot at the
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
And so within like 12 months, I had built up my clientele enough that I was able to actually move salons and go independent shortly after that.
Awesome.
So,
And
and
was
that was
that
all
mostly, yeah, I was going to say that was because of Instagram.
because of Instagram. And it was also because of, and that was also without working those evenings or weekends, which was the big thing for me. And what I had realized in that journey is that when I first was kind of posting all these photos, I was getting clients, but they weren't necessarily the right clients.
Mm.
So almost intuitively, I had shifted what I was posting to attract the right people and, kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and started showing up as myself. And that was a crazy difference. So all of a sudden, through trial and error, I realized, okay, this is actually how I attract not only clients, but dream clients.
I love that. So it's all about like you're obsessed with Instagram, you love it. I personally hate Instagram. Like I'm all about the advertising, but I loathe spending time on Instagram. So it's great that you're helping people like me who actually don't enjoy it and it doesn't come naturally. So I want to talk about Instagram in a second, but first of all, the topic that we wanted to get into is about branding on Instagram.
Yeah.
So you told me at the beginning, you're not about like fixing the algorithm and all those little like tricks to like get your posts seen by more people and stuff. You're more about building the foundation, and I'm assuming that by that you mean your brand. So can you tell us a little bit about like what that means about having a brand on Instagram?
Yes. So I talk a lot about Instagram because that's kind of like the how I started in this industry, but I
Yeah.
definitely talk more about branding now. And the reason for that is because I think that so many times when stylists get frustrated, overwhelmed, and stressed out about Instagram, it's not actually, it's because they're not getting the results they want. That's like 90% of the thing. And then also because it's difficult, they think I have to constantly create different content. I have to
Mm-hmm.
constantly be reinventing the wheel. And what I have found is that, and both through, my personal experience, a lot of the work I do for my clients, and then the results of my students is that the less you do in regards to like spinning the wheel and the more you stick to those key brand pillars in all sides of your business, the easier it is. And that's what it came down to. So essentially, the way that I teach branding is defining, there's basically four key things: your ideal client, your values, your voice, and your visuals. And so often, a lot of the branding education that I've seen has been, 15 minutes on the end of a balayage class on like how to put colors on your highlights and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, but it goes so much deeper. And I think that the reason that I choose to teach it this way is because I think that it makes it easier for people, which is a big thing because stylists are wearing a lot of hats now, especially independent stylists. Like it's not just showing up at the salon anymore. And also because it's more effective. Like if you can show up, and by showing up and being branded on Instagram, I guess to kind of take it back a step, what I mean by that is just having your content and having your messaging being consistent and recognizable so that when someone lands on your Instagram page, it is abundantly clear and very obvious if what you do is what they're looking for, and two, if you are the right fit personality wise. So I think that's kind of one of my favorite branding quotes is a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah, I love that.
For whatever reason, I'm blanking on who said that right now, but I
I
think it was
think,
Jeff Bezos.
yeah, I think I listened to your podcast and you said it was Jeff, so it probably
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of why I focus so much on this, because it works, it's important. And also, I want to dive a little deeper than the buzzwords. And, 90% of the time, if people aren't getting results on Instagram, from, creating content, all this stuff, like, I think there's so much advice out there that's not really relevant to our industry. Like, a lot of the advice is for creators. And so if you want to grow just a following, that's great. But I always think about, like, okay, so if you get your viral post, because that's what a lot of Instagram education seems to be about. So if you get your viral post, let's just say that that happens, right? And you reach a ton of people, you get a ton of awareness, and then they, like your post or whatever, and then come back to your page and they don't know what you're about or what you do. That's where it's going to end. So
Yeah.
all this work you put into creating this viral post is ultimately going to, give you a boost in your vanity metrics for a week and then go away forever. Whereas if you put the time into building your foundation, it's actually going to propel you. And I always think that the best vanity metric is money in your bank account. So
Absolutely. I think that too. It's hard sometimes because on Instagram, the likes and the comments feel like they mean so much, but you're running a business, you're not running a business to get likes and comments. And you kind of have to sacrifice sometimes that like feel good thing for figuring out what actually works to build your business.
yes.
Okay, so let's talk about like branding. There's so many misconceptions about what it is, and so many people teach it different ways. People think a lot of times branding is just the visual part, and I know you mentioned that is one of like the pillars. Before we get into like how to brand on Instagram, can you kind of go through again what are those four pillars and what they mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is, and arguably this is in no order, the first two, but the first two are ideal client and your values. So your ideal client is, it's something that people, we talk about a lot now, I think, but everyone is so resistant to this idea of creating that, that ideal client or
Yeah.
ideal community avatar. And so that is just simply figuring out who you're talking to. And the reason for that isn't, and I'm sure you know this, but for whoever is watching, the reason for that is because it enables you to be so much more clear on your
Mm-hmm.
messaging when you have that picture in your mind.
Yeah.
So super, super important. And then the second is your values. So what is it? And this is transcends Instagram. It transcends even marketing. It's literally the foundation of your business. So when it comes to like choosing, even retail partners, when it comes to choosing your location, all of these things, that all comes down to your values. So what is it that you are trying to create? And these can be things like, is being sustainable and eco-friendly something that you're really passionate about? Is creating a really relaxing environment something that you highly value? Do you want to be more like high fashion and like trendy? Do you want to be more like, these are kind of examples of what that value could look
Yeah.
like. That's kind of going to be the true north for your business. So what all of this comes back to is creating that. And I'm going to give you an example when we get to visuals of why that's important.
Okay.
And then the third thing is your voice. So your voice, the way I teach it, I kind of, because these are kind of my categories, is that it's a combination of both your brand tone and voice and your messaging.
Yeah.
So two different things, both kind of fit into that category though. So your tone would be, for instance, like if you're not somebody who is naturally sarcastic, if you're not someone who's naturally, funny, don't try to be on Instagram because you think that's what you
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
right?
It comes
um,
across as fake. We all, especially if the people, it just doesn't feel right for you. And the people who know you are like, but that's not actually her.
Totally. And then I think we forget the end goal sometimes. The end goal is that this person comes to see you, or, if you're an educator, this person like consumes your content or whatever. And if you spend all this time building the know, like, and trust factor on a voice that isn't authentic to you, as soon as they actually step into your salon or, take the next step with you, it's going to be like, ugh, like that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And that is basically the worst possible thing that can happen
Yeah.
when you're building that know, like, and trust with your clients, right?
Yeah.
Because you want that whole experience to be super seamless and for them to trust you, and consistency is key there.
Okay.
Um,
So that's the third one is voice. And then what's the
yeah.
fourth one?
The fourth one is your visuals. So that's what I think everyone thinks about when it comes to branding, is that's kind of the first thing. So visuals are important because your brain absorbs visual information so much faster. And it's a
Right.
really great way to build consistency. So I do think visual branding is important. But the reason that it's so important to do all this other stuff first is, think about, just off the top of your head, think about if your values, right? If you are a salon suite and you want to create like a relaxing escape, and you want to create this like spa-like experience where, your guests feel very nurtured and taken care of, and you don't define that before you create your brand palette, and let's say that you happen to be a huge fan of neons, that does not compute.
Yes.
So like, if you do all this visual branding before you take the time to define your values and, your voice and your ideal client, you can often end up contradicting yourself completely, because you need to make sure, and like even things like typography, like fonts, if you're more like elegant, you don't want to do like a giant marker font, right? Whereas that might work perfectly for someone who's super fun and spunky, and it's not about, I saw like a lot of this a couple years ago when, like that boho vibe came in, and it was like all of a sudden everyone was boho, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I love it. Like, I think it's a very pretty aesthetic, but does that actually represent what you're trying to create? So I think that by defining everything first, you're able to be a lot more intentional with your visuals.
Yeah. Okay. So just to summarize, it's it was a lot of V's. The first one is your clients though, right?
Yes. So values, voice, and visuals are like the three pillars. And when I
Okay.
teach it, ideal client is in with values.
Okay.
So it's three V's, just to keep it super simple. But ideal clients is one that I think is just worth mentioning on its own, because that really is one of the first steps when you're
Yes,
marketing. Right?
absolutely. So for me, and I'm sure that you have struggled with this yourself, maybe at the beginning, and some of your students struggle with it too. I know who I am pretty well, but translating that into a business presence and a brand that actually I can like share with people is really tricky, because first of all, it's hard to take who you are and your personality and make it come across the same online. Um, and second of all, even though we instinctively know who we are, we have a hard time, or I have a hard time, like defining myself, like finding 5 words to define who I am is really hard. So what do you like? I know that you're teaching branding based on a lot of like who you are as a person, like taking your personal brand and turning that into your business brand. But like, what if you even have a hard time figuring that out?
Well, that is such a good question. And that's like one of the first things that I go through with my students or clients when I'm coaching, is like pulling that out of you, because it's not always natural. And sometimes, your personal, all the things that are personal about you can align with what you define for your business,
Mm-hmm.
but they aren't necessarily going to be the same. One of the biggest things and pieces of advice I can give on this is like, a lot of what is working now, and a lot of the reason that personal branding I think is so important, is that relatability factor. So being relatable is really important, because people connect with people,
Yeah.
right? It's not like person to business. So one of the easy exercises you can do, and no, simple, not easy, is thinking about, once you have a picture of that ideal client, what do you guys have in common? Like, what's the commonality? What are things that you might relate on or connect on? And for a stylist behind the chair, like, you don't necessarily have to invent this ideal client. Maybe you have like one or, five of the perfect clients, the kind that when they sit in your chair, you're like, I can't believe that this is what I get paid to do, because it's just so fun and it's so aligned and fulfilling. Think about that person or an amalgamation of those people and start there. Because I think that's kind of, you don't have to bare your soul on Instagram to build a personal brand. So I'm not saying that you can't have boundaries, because there's a lot of things that I don't share, but I try to think about like, what is it in my personal life? What can I draw from my personal experiences that might be valuable and relatable to the people that I want to help and serve? And that's kind of where you can start if you're like, I have no idea. I don't know.
It's tough. And like I'm sure that you've had this yourself. Like it evolves over time as you gain confidence being more yourself and sharing more about who you really are. Because a lot of us start out in our businesses when we go out on our own for the first time. We're so scared of screwing up. We're so scared of judgment and of people, especially people that we know, looking at us the wrong way and thinking,
Yes.
thinking, well, who do you think, who does she think she is? That we really try to blend in or hide, and so we're really not building a brand that's unique at that point, and
Yeah.
we're just kind of one in a million. Sorry, we're not one in a million. We're like the opposite of that. We look like all other businesses, all other hairstylists or beauty pros or business owners.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is like, it's so easy to feel like you don't have anything unique about yourself. And like, I have a ton of exercises that I go through with like my students and clients about, how to pull that out of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I want everyone listening to this to just like, it's not up for debate. Like, you are unique. There's nothing, like, there's no one else in the world that is you, right? So there is going to be something that you can um, narrow down and kind of
Yeah.
like dial in on. And I think sometimes too, like, we overcomplicate it so much. Like, one of the pillars, actually, I'll give an example of one of mine, that wasn't, like you said, I did struggle at the beginning. Absolutely. Because I think it's something that evolves. It's not, branding isn't like, check, like, I'm branded now, good to
Mm-hmm.
go. Because we're people, right? We evolve over time. But like,
Yeah.
personal development is something that I struggled talking about initially, because, like you said, I wanted everyone to think I was already like, so perfect. I don't need to
Yeah.
work on it. I'm naturally awesome at everything, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what we think we have to project. And maybe that worked 5 years ago, but that's not what people want to see now. People don't want to see this like, I don't want to be on a pedestal anymore. I want to be like walking beside people in my community to help them get to where they're going.
Yeah.
So I talk about personal development because I realized and I learned through, talking to the people that take my courses or work with me or my clients, that that's something that we have in common. Like, reading personal development books, like wanting to work on ourselves and be the best version, be happier, is something that we had in common. So that's kind of an example of something that doesn't, it kind of has something to do with my business, not 100%, that I still talk about because it's valuable to my ideal client.
Yeah, I love that. So it does take a little bit of soul searching and really digging deep to figure out, okay, who am I? How am I going to define that? How do I, even get the confidence to like share more about me and my brand and what makes me unique and all of that kind of thing. So it does take time. Once, I'm sure we could talk for days about that, but once we have kind of like figured out what those pillars are of our brands, we've understood what made us unique. We've understood who our clientele is, what our values are, and created like a visual identity based on that. What are your tips for taking that to Instagram? Actually, before we get there, what is the consequence of not doing branding on Instagram? Like, what if we don't
Mhm.
end up like creating a brand on Instagram? What happens?
That's such a good question. So I guess there's two. One, you're going to spend a lot more time to get worse results. So you're going to have to spend a lot more time creating content. And then they might not ever transform, like convert into actual clients, because people think that someone finds them on Instagram, sees a hair photo, and then goes and books an appointment. And that's just not typically the way it works. There needs to be some kind of incentive. There needs to be some kind of nurturing. Like with ads, it's a little bit different because I know you're putting together more of like a package. But all things being equal, typically you got to nurture them a little bit. So they'll follow you. And then, I had clients that followed me for 3 years and were like, oh, I saw when you posted this, and it just like, I had to book an appointment immediately. So you never know what it's going to be. So yeah, I think that's the main thing is like, you're not going to be able to be intentional. You're going to spend way more time, and you're mostly not going to get those ideal clients in your chair, which makes your job better. Like if you have people that you already like, know, and trust you, who already have faith in what you do and trust you to take great care of them, your job is going to be so much easier behind the chair.
Yeah. Because they're resonating with you. They're seeing your brand and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is the person for me. And so you're really attracting the right people.
Totally. And like, I know that stylists watching this will relate if you've been in the industry for more than like 10 years, but back in the day, when I first got into the industry, it was all about the salon you worked at that was like getting you clients and feeding you clients. And first time client anxiety was real. Like that was like one of the hardest things because you're like, are they going to like me? Are they going to like my work? Is it going to be a good fit? Like it was really, really difficult.
It's like an audition.
Yes. Oh my God. And it's like nerve wracking. So if you had like 5 new clients in a day, it was a rough day. So now, like through attracting clients on Instagram, it really, really takes a lot of that out of it because they come in and they're like, I chose you. Like you are the reason that I am here. It's not about like, oh, this convenient salon was there on my drive home from work. So
right.
It allows you to, have a more fulfilling career, which I think is super important.
I love that. That is so great. Okay, so we need to be branding on Instagram. We've dug deep. We have, figured out more about who we are. We're not 100% sure yet, but we're ready to like start doing that branding work. How do you translate that onto Instagram? Like, what are your biggest tips for actually creating an Instagram page and content that really does a good job of sharing who we are with the right people?
Ooh, I love that. So content plan. Having a content plan is huge because that way, when someone lands on your page, they're getting all the relevant info. So there's a bunch of pillars that I talk about, like, for example, showcasing testimonials. That's a big one. Guest experience, like establishing yourself as the expert in your chosen niche. So there's all those types of things. And then importantly, and this is really, really important. So if you take nothing else away from this, be present on your page. Switch out that logo for a photo of you.
Yes.
Make sure at least every 9 photos, because that's typically as far back as most people will go on your first. I would even push you to every 6 at least. Make sure you are showing up there. And then as far as visual branding, like I love to create and I think for stylists now, like Instagram's moving away from photo only feeds. So, if you're creating content, educational carousel posts for your clients or, graphics, and highlight covers, that's a great place to show off your visual brand. So whether it is, your imagery that you're choosing, your color palette, all of those places are really great to show that off. But my biggest thing is like, having a content plan. Because if you have that, and by content plan, I mean, the way I teach it, we basically have like 3 content purposes and then 3 categories in each of them. So when someone comes to your page, it's obvious like what you do and who you do it for. And that is that's really the most simple way I can put it down.
How do you share that? Like, it's such a big thing. Like, is it a lot in your bio, for example?
So it's a combination of your bio and your photos for sure, and your content. Because for instance, if you are, I'm just going to use balayage specialist. If you're a balayage specialist or a curl specialist, don't post photos that aren't of of your niche, right? So when someone comes to your page, they should be able to see. One of my clients actually did such a beautiful job on this. She transitioned into being a curl specialist, and everything she posts is literally about curls, how to take care of your curls, photos of curls. Her bio, she changed her name to, it used to be Dana Loves My Hair, and now it's Dana Loves My Curls. And so just all in on that.
Yeah.
And then in your bio, you absolutely want to say, like, we do like a value statement or a brand statement, really simple in my program, where it's basically like, I blank for blank. And I've had students literally put that in their bio. Like, I create low maintenance hair for busy entrepreneurs. Something as simple as that. Or you can just kind of put like what it is that you specialize in, your city, all of those types of things. But yes, so bio for sure. Highlights are great for this as well, but you don't want to put too much information on there because people won't go through them. So it's great to just kind of like highlight, and then your content. It's super, super important.
Yeah.
And I'm going to add too, if you're intentional about your content, you don't have to post every day, because when people land on your page, they'll be able to see what you're about, even if you're only posting like 2 times a week.
Yeah. I told you I hate Instagram. And I post on there usually. I sometimes will go weeks without posting, and then I'll post like once a week. Maximum I post twice a week. Usually I'm like once a week, and it's like painful. But that is to say that I know how important my Instagram page is, because I have a lot of people checking me out for the first time on my Instagram page. Like, I'm not constantly posting in order to have my existing followers like see my content pop up on their feed all the time. I mean, that is part of it. I definitely do like want to stay active, but I just realized that like there's a lot of people just researching me. They find me from, podcasts like yours or my website or Google. They just find me in tons of different places, and the number one thing that they want to check out is my Instagram page, because they want to get a feel not just for my business but who I am. So I know that like even posts from months ago people are seeing, because they're, going there and swiping and all that kind of thing. So I think that people don't really look at Instagram so much as like a library or an archive, or kind of like a brochure. Those are all old school words, but like it kind of is that too. It's not just about like having tons of like likes and comments on your new posts. It's also just like, what do you want to show off when people come to visit your profile for the first time?
Totally. And I think it just like goes to, it's also another thing that it's great for is like just nurturing people, right? So even I'm like a big, this kind of off topic, but like batching content and pre-scheduling it into a scheduling app. Like, I run 9 different social media accounts. And so if I were posting every day and, like doing it manually, there's literally no way I could keep up.
Yeah.
So I teach my students and I get my clients to literally put in like a few hours a month, get it all scheduled. And that way you don't even have to think about it. And even if you're only posting twice a week, that there's going to be just that thing in case someone lands on your page to show like, oh, hey, I'm still here. I'm still active.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
even referrals now, right? Like you said, off of like my podcast or any other podcast, or so that's already comes with a personal recommendation, and this applies to to hairstylists as well. Even if, say, a new potential client's friend refers you, it's not like, oh, this is the referral, here's my girl's number anymore. It's like, here's a referral, check out their Instagram page. And that's where that begins. So it's important, even if word of mouth is your number one marketing strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, your Instagram page should be a curation of who you are and what your brand is.
Totally.
It's just hard. And I know that like you enjoy Instagram, and that's awesome. What would you say for someone who is serious about building a brand that's unique and that really is meaningful, but they're like me and they're like, oh, Instagram just feels, and it's not for me, it's not really the time. And I think that people use time as an excuse. I
Yeah.
truly think that the hardest thing about Instagram is getting out of your own head, because we judge ourselves so much for how our content does, for like how many likes and comments it gets. So like, what's your best piece of advice for someone who has a really hard time letting go of like the stress and the judgment around Instagram?
Ooh, that's such a good question. And I'd say like a solid 50% of the people I work with fall into that category.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not all people who like love Instagram that I work with. Most of the time it's like the reason they choose me actually is because I'm like, I want to make it easy and
Yeah, they
stress
don't want to
free
deal with
and
that
not.
mental stress anymore.
Yes. So my biggest piece of advice is like it's kind of like a mindset shift combined with a strategy. And the mindset shift is like it's not always about you. It's about your client. And that's like I mean that with so much love, but it's like I think so often we think about, and I 100% this was me. Like at the beginning of my journey, I was like, oh, like it's all like I don't want people to judge me. But what I like to think about is like, how much is it worth to you to like protect your comfort zone that much that you're withholding what it is that you do and what you have to offer from the people that it can help?
Hmm.
And that applies to educators as educators. It also applies to stylists because there is literally no point in being the best kept secret because I fully believe that everyone has like a unique magic and a unique talent that that is of service to the world. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
of service to the people that it's for, right? So it's a combination of that mindset shift and then also setting it and forgetting it is the most powerful tool in your arsenal. Like batch your content, schedule it, and you will not be as obsessed with the outcome of every post. Because when you sit there and you like have to ideate and then create and then post it, then all you're left to do is like sit there and be like, how's it
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. It's a lot of
Like,
mental noise after you press
yeah,
publish.
totally. So if you can do it in advance and it's just scheduled out and it's auto publishing, you don't have to worry as much about it because it's just like it's essentially a task that you get to check off your to-do list. Like, okay, the month is scheduled and like that's 8 posts if you post twice a week. So
Yeah.
that's really not like you could do that in a couple hours.
Yeah.
Um
And then just do
so
Instagram stories throughout the day. And there's a lot less, I find there's a lot less pressure with stories.
totally. And even stories now, like you don't have to be on your stories every single day anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was something that you used to have to do. Now it's like, if you have 2 posts a week going out and you can show up on your Instagram stories 3 to 5 times a week, you're good to go. Honestly, that is enough to show that you're present, that you're
Yeah.
doing the thing. And just it's not about perfect anymore. It's about relatable. Like I watched your Instagram story this morning actually, and I was like, oh, that's so relatable.
Yeah.
Like I loved that. So, just it's interesting because a lot of the things we think are like boring or just we take for granted about ourselves, it's interesting to other people. Like how much do we sit there and watch their I know like if you think about how you consume, you're not judging every piece of content you come across.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh cool, like that's a good point or that's neat or whatever,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to put so much pressure on everything. I think
I
that's the
know.
biggest thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That's very uplifting. And it's a really, really good reminder for us, for those of us who like judge ourselves more than anything else on Instagram. So thanks for that, Jodie. This has been so helpful. I love your tips about figuring out your 4 pillars for building your brand and then how to translate that on Instagram and how crucial it is to be a real person and show up. I love all your tips. If someone wants to learn more from you about branding, building a brand on Instagram, where can they find you? And do you have any like resources that they can grab from you to start working on that?
I definitely do. And this is not going to surprise anyone, but the best place to connect with me is over on Instagram.
Instagram. Yeah, I bet.
So my handle is it's Jodie Brown. And then I have 2 really great resources if you are wanting to kind of start this. And they're totally free. So the first would be my podcast. Stephanie has an amazing I think you have 2 amazing episodes on there. So, and then I do a mixture of interviews and then like trainings. So I've got a couple or a few really great like actionable branding trainings that are episodes there. And I also have a free resource called the 3-Step Path to Content That Connects. And essentially that's going to break down it's a no fluff guide to actually knowing what about your ideal client matters. So it's not like a 10-page form. It's literally like 4 questions that'll give you everything you need to get started. And then your brand voice and also some really great tips for taking the stress out of content creation. And you can find that at jodiebrown.ca/CTC.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to link to it below this video too. Definitely check out Jodie, guys. Her Instagram is amazing and she's just such a cool person. So I really hope that you all connect with her. Thank you so much again, Jodie, for coming on, and I hope that we're going to be able to connect again soon. Enjoy the amazing winter out in Alberta.
I'll try to survive it.
Okay, bye for now.